In the unforgiving Wyoming Territory of 1852, a wealthy rancher facing a debilitating illness finds unexpected healing in the hands of his housekeeper's shy daughter, who practices traditional Arapaho medicine scorned by society. Will Nathaniel Reid discover that his greatest weakness might lead to his most profound strength in the rancher's remedy? The wind howled like a wounded animal across the plains of Wyoming Territory in 1852, rattling the windows of Nathaniel Reid's sprawling ranch house. He stood at his bedroom mirror, watching with horror as his right hand shook uncontrollably while trying to fasten his collar. At 43, Nathaniel had built an empire spanning 5,000 acres, but now his own body was betraying him. "Blast it all," he muttered, dropping the silver collar pin for the third time. The tremor had started small, just a slight quiver when he was tired, but now it came without warning, making even the simplest tasks a battle. A soft knock interrupted his struggle. "Mr. Reid?" called Mrs. Willoughby, his housekeeper of 7 years. "Dr. Finch has arrived from Cheyenne." "Send him up," Nathaniel ordered, kicking the fallen pin under the dresser rather than attempting to retrieve it. This would be the fourth doctor in as many months. Dr. Finch was younger than Nathaniel expected, with spectacles that magnified his eyes to owlish proportions. He unpacked his medical bag methodically, arranging gleaming instruments on the bedside table. "How long have the tremors been present?" he asked, pressing cold fingers against Nathaniel's wrist to check his pulse. "Since January. Started in my right hand, now spreads up my arm. Some days I can barely hold a fork." The examination continued in silence, broken only by the doctor's occasional or instruction to "look here" or "squeeze my fingers." Finally, he stepped back, frowning. "Mr. Reid, I must be frank. The symptoms you're experiencing match a condition I've observed in several patients back east. A degenerative disorder of the nerves. Can you fix it?" Nathaniel demanded, clenching his good hand into a fist. "There is no cure, I'm afraid. Electric therapy might provide temporary relief. But I didn't ask for relief, doctor. I asked for a cure." Nathaniel's voice could have frozen water. "I've built everything I have with these hands. They can't fail me now. Medicine has its limits, sir. I can prescribe laudanum for when the pain begins." "Pain? There'll be pain too?" The doctor's silence was answer enough. Outside the bedroom window, Nathaniel could see his men driving cattle toward the north pasture, their movements sure and strong in the morning light. He'd started with nothing, sleeping under stars and eating beans from a can. Now he employed 20 men, owned the finest horses in 3 territories, and had more money than he could spend in 2 lifetimes. None of it meant a thing if his body crumbled like a rotting fence post. "Get out," he said quietly to the doctor, "and send in Mrs. Willoughby." When the housekeeper entered, Nathaniel was standing at the window, back straight as an arrow despite the tremor now visible in his shoulders. "Find me another doctor," he commanded without turning. "Someone better than these territory quacks. Write to Chicago, New York, even Europe if you must." "Yes, sir." She hesitated, then added, "Dr. Finch is highly regarded." "Did I ask your opinion?" he snapped, finally facing her. Something in her expression, not fear, but a quiet sadness, made him regret his tone. "Just do as I say, Mrs. Willoughby." After she left, Nathaniel tried to pour himself a drink, but watched helplessly as the whiskey sloshed over the rim of the glass, staining the expensive carpet imported from Philadelphia. Rage bubbled up inside him like a geyser. He hurled the glass against the wall, watching it shatter into glittering shards. He didn't hear the door open again, didn't notice the slight figure who slipped in to clean up his mess, until she was already kneeling, carefully picking up pieces of broken glass. Lily Willoughby, the housekeeper's daughter, worked swiftly and silently, her dark hair falling forward to hide her face. At 19, she moved through the house like a shadow, speaking only when spoken to. Most days, Nathaniel barely registered her presence. But today, he noticed something strange. Her hands, reddened from work, but perfectly steady as they gathered the dangerous fragments. "Don't cut yourself," he said. the closest thing to kindness he'd offered anyone in weeks. Lily looked up, startled by his attention, and for the first time, Nathaniel really saw her eyes deep brown with flecks of gold, wise beyond her years. "Some things that break can be mended, Mr. Reid," she said softly, rising with the glass shards cupped carefully in her palms. "Not everything is lost forever." Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving Nathaniel with a curious feeling he couldn't name, something between hope and fear, possibility and doubt. Thunderclouds gathered on the horizon like a herd of dark buffalo, promising relief from the August heat that had baked the Wyoming earth to dusty hardness. Nathaniel Reid sat in his study, surrounded by papers bearing the letterheads of medical institutions from St. Louis to Boston. 6 more doctors had come and gone since spring, each one taking his money and leaving him with the same grim forecast. A knock at the door pulled him from his dark thoughts. "Enter," he called, quickly covering his trembling left hand with his right, a habit he'd developed even when alone. Mrs. Willoughby stepped in, her face pinched with worry. "Dr. Brunswick has arrived from Chicago, sir. Shall I show him in?" Nathaniel nodded, squaring his shoulders. This doctor had cost him more than all the others combined, his journey from Illinois requiring a private train car and a handsome advance payment. Dr. Brunswick swept into the room with the confidence of a man whose opinions were rarely questioned. His suit was finer than Nathaniel's, his beard precisely trimmed. "Mr. Reid," he began without preamble, "I've reviewed the notes from your previous physicians. Tell me, have you experienced difficulty swallowing or changes in your voice?" The question struck Nathaniel like a physical blow. "Sometimes food sticks in my throat," he admitted reluctantly, "and my men have asked me to repeat myself more than once lately." Brunswick nodded, as if confirming a suspicion. "Please stand," and walk to the window and back. Nathaniel complied, aware of a new stiffness in his legs, a slight drag in his step he'd been trying to ignore. The examination continued, with mechanical precision testing reflexes, examining eyes, noting the tremors that Nathaniel could no longer hide. Finally, Brunswick sat back, steepling his fingers beneath his chin. "You've been told you have a degenerative condition of the nerves, Mr. Reid. I concur with this diagnosis. I didn't bring you all this way to tell me what I already know," Nathaniel growled. "I want solutions. I've brought several treatments we're exploring at my institution," Brunswick replied, opening his case to reveal vials of amber liquid, an experimental compound derived from South American plants, combined with regular electric therapy. "Will it stop the progression?" A pause. "It may slow it." "May?" Nathaniel slammed his good hand on the desk. "I've built this ranch from nothing. I have men who depend on me, contracts to fulfill, enemies waiting for any sign of weakness. I need certainty, doctor, not possibilities." Brunswick's expression hardened. "Then I must disappoint you, Mr. Reid. Medicine isn't magic. We can try these treatments, but I must be honest, your condition will worsen. Eventually you will lose the ability to ride, to write, perhaps even to feed yourself." The clock on the mantel ticked loudly in the silence that followed, marking seconds of a life suddenly measured in rapid decline rather than achievement. "How long?" Nathaniel finally asked, his voice barely audible. 2 years, perhaps 3 before you're bedridden. Though given the rapid progression you've experienced already, it could be sooner." After Brunswick left to settle in the guest room, Nathaniel remained at his desk as twilight deepened outside. Rain began to fall, gentle at first, then in sheets that obscured the view of his vast property. The empire he'd built through sheer will and ruthless determination would outlast him, but who would maintain it? He had no wife, no children, no heir to his hard-won kingdom. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed by a crash of thunder that rattled the windows. The storm matched his inner turmoil perfectly. The door opened without a knock, startling him. Lily entered with a tea tray, moving carefully in the dim light. "I didn't call for tea," he said, harsher than intended. "Mother thought you might need something warm," she replied, setting the tray down. "The weather has turned cold." Nathaniel noticed she had brought 2 cups. "Planning to join me?" he asked with bitter amusement. To his surprise, she pulled up a chair opposite his desk. If you'll allow it. The boldness was so unexpected that he found himself nodding. She poured tea with steady hands, adding honey to his cup without asking, somehow knowing his preference, despite him never having told her. I heard Dr. Brunswick's diagnosis, she said, her voice quiet but direct. Anger flashed through him. Been eavesdropping, have you? The walls aren't thick, and you weren't speaking softly. She met his gaze without flinching. I know something that might help you, Mr. Reid. He laughed without humor. Something 7 trained physicians couldn't discover? Don't waste my time, girl. My grandmother was Arapaho, Lily continued as if he hadn't spoken. She was a healer among her people before she married my grandfather. She taught me many things before she died. Nathaniel stared at her, seeing for the first time the high cheekbones, the copper undertones in her skin that hinted at her heritage. Mrs. Willoughby was as English as tea and toast. He had never considered her husband might have been anything else. You're suggesting, what? Indian remedies? Tribal dances? Magic spells? His tone was mocking, but underneath lurked a desperate hope he couldn't quite suppress. Lightning flashed again, illuminating Lily's face. There was no offense taken in her expression, only calm certainty. I'm suggesting that there are ways of healing the body that your doctors haven't considered, she said. Ways that treat the whole person, not just the symptoms. And why would you help me? Nathaniel asked, genuine curiosity breaking through his skepticism. I've hardly been kind to you or your mother. You've given us a home and fair wages when many wouldn't employ a half-Indian girl or her mother, Lily said simply. Besides, my grandmother taught me that healing is not a gift to keep for oneself, but to share with those who need it. The rain drummed against the windows, creating a rhythm like distant hoofbeats. Nathaniel studied the young woman across from him, no longer invisible, but suddenly the most interesting person in his world. What would these treatments involve? He asked finally. Herbs gathered at specific times, preparations my grandmother taught me to make, pressure on certain points of the body, and something else. She hesitated. What? You would need to believe it might work, she said. The mind and body cannot be separated in healing. Nathaniel almost laughed again but stopped himself. What did he have to lose? Brunswick's treatment sounded no less bizarre, with far less promise. When would we begin? He asked, surprising himself with the question. Lily's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected him to agree so readily. Tonight, if you wish, after Mother is asleep. She wouldn't understand. As she rose to leave, Nathaniel noticed how the lamplight caught the determined set of her jaw, the quiet confidence in her movements. For the first time in months, he felt something other than despair, a tiny spark of possibility, fragile as a bird's egg, but undeniably present. Lily? He called as she reached the door. Thank you. She turned, her smile transforming her from plain to beautiful in an instant. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Reid. The journey to healing is never easy for either of us. Rain hammered against the window panes like angry fists demanding entry. Nathaniel Reid paced his study, each step a battle against the invisible enemy claiming his body. Outside, the Wyoming sky wept, turning the autumn of 1852 into a muddy prison around his grand house. Mr. Reid? A soft voice barely carried over the storm's tantrum. He turned to find Lily Willoughby standing in the doorway, a tray of tea balanced in her steady hands. Something about those hands caught his attention. They never shook, never hesitated. Not like his own, which betrayed him more with each passing day. Your evening tea, she said, eyes downcast as she placed the tray on his desk. The cup rattled as another wave of tremors seized his right arm. Hot liquid splashed across important papers. Fury and shame burned his throat. Useless, he muttered. More to himself than to her. Everything I built, and now I can't hold a simple teacup. Instead of scurrying away as she usually did, Lily surprised him by reaching for a cloth and calmly blotting the spilled tea. Her movements were sure, practiced, like water flowing over smooth stones. The body speaks when words cannot. she said quietly, still not meeting his eyes directly. What did you say? Nathaniel demanded, unused to hearing the shy girl express any opinion. Lily finally looked up, her dark eyes holding something he hadn't noticed before: confidence. My grandmother believed illness tells us what our mind refuses to hear, she explained, her voice gaining strength with each word. The doctors seek to silence the symptom, not understand its message. Nathaniel laughed bitterly. And what message is my body sending by making me shake like a leaf in winter? That is for you to discover, she answered simply. A week later, after another doctor departed with nothing but grim predictions and a fat payment, Nathaniel found himself alone in the hallway, when a particularly violent spell of dizziness struck. The world tilted sideways, floor rushing up to meet him. His pride hurt worse than his knees when they hit the expensive carpet. Footsteps approached light, quick. He braced himself for the humiliation of being discovered by a servant. It was Lily who knelt beside him, not with pity, but with a healer's assessment in her gaze. Let me help you, she said, no longer the timid shadow who had worked in his house for 3 years. The doctors can't help me. What could you possibly do? He challenged, even as he allowed her to support his weight. Doctors look for sickness in the body, Lily replied. My grandmother taught me to see when the spirit and body no longer dance together. Your grandmother was a medicine woman? Nathaniel asked, surprising himself with genuine curiosity rather than dismissal. Lily helped him to a nearby chair before answering. She was Arapaho. She knew things about healing that cannot be learned from books. Under normal circumstances, Nathaniel would have scoffed at such talk, but desperation had worn down his pride like water against stone. 7 doctors had failed him. What did he have to lose? Can you? The words stuck in his throat, unused to asking for help. Can you do what she did? Lily's face softened. Some of it. I was young when she died, but she taught me many things before the fever took her. That night, after Mrs. Willoughby retired, Lily returned to Nathaniel's study with a small deerskin pouch. By lamplight, she mixed herbs that filled the room with earthy scents. Her hands moved with purpose, as she explained each step, each plant's purpose. This is not magic, she told him firmly. It is knowledge passed down through generations. When her fingers pressed points along his arm that somehow connected to the pain in his head, Nathaniel felt something shift within him, not a cure, but a whisper of possibility, where there had been only dread. Why would you help me? He asked as the treatment ended. I've hardly spoken 10 words to you before today. Lily packed her supplies with careful movements. Because healing is not just for those who deserve it, she answered. It is for those who need it. For the first time in months, Nathaniel slept without nightmares of his coming helplessness. Morning mist hung low over the pasture as Nathaniel attempted to mount his favorite stallion. 3 weeks of Lily's treatments had reduced his tremors enough that he could attempt riding again, a small victory that meant everything to a man who measured his worth by what he could control. His foot had just reached the stirrup when a voice cut through the fog like a knife. Well, well! The mighty Reid, struggling to get on his own horse. Nathaniel turned slowly, recognizing the mocking tone before seeing the man who owned it. Edward Hollister leaned against the corral fence, his expensive coat unmarked by dust, despite the long ride to the ranch. Hollister, Nathaniel acknowledged, forcing his voice to remain steady. Bit far from your own property, aren't you? Edward strolled closer, each step deliberate as a chess move. Just checking on my investment. I don't recall selling you anything, Nathaniel replied, finally pulling himself into the saddle with an effort that made sweat bead on his forehead. Not yet, Edward smiled, revealing teeth too perfect to belong to a true rancher. But I hear interesting things from your newest doctor. Neurological degradation, wasn't it? Fascinating how the mighty body betrays us all eventually. Cold dread pooled in Nathaniel's stomach. Dr. Brunswick had shared his private medical information, a betrayal that shouldn't have surprised him. Men like Hollister had ways of loosening tongues. I'm managing just fine, Nathaniel lied. Gathering the reins in hands he prayed wouldn't start shaking. Edward's laugh held no warmth. Of course you are. That's why your foreman Wilson had to secure that loan from my bank last spring. Operating costs getting a bit much, with the boss indisposed? Nathaniel stiffened. He hadn't known about any loan. Wilson had kept it from him, probably thinking he had enough worries. Now that knowledge sat between him and Hollister like a loaded gun. What do you want, Edward? He asked directly. Just to make a friendly offer, Edward replied, pulling off his gloves with theatrical slowness. Sell me the northern section, the part with river access, and I'll forgive Wilson's loan. Keep your pride. And most of your empire. Nathaniel felt anger rising, a familiar heat that burned away fear. And if I refuse? Then I call in the loan in 30 days, as is my right. Wilson can't pay. You're too sick to manage. The bank forecloses, and I buy it all at auction for pennies. Edward's smile widened. But I'm a reasonable man. This way, you keep something. Before Nathaniel could respond, a rider appeared from the direction of the main house. Lily, surprisingly confident on horseback, her dark hair loose in the morning breeze. Mr. Reid, she called, ignoring Hollister completely. Mrs. Willoughby needs to speak with you about supplies for winter. Edward's eyes narrowed as he studied the young woman. Your housekeeper's daughter, isn't she? Heard some interesting things about her too. Indian remedies and midnight visits to the master's study. The implication hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Nathaniel felt his hand tighten on the reins, ready to defend Lily's honor, but she spoke first. Mr. Hollister, she acknowledged, with a calm that surprised both men. Your business with Mr. Reid is concluded, I believe. Something in her steady gaze made Edward step back. For now, he agreed, putting his gloves back on with a theatrical flourish. 30 days, Reid. Consider my offer. As Hollister rode away, Nathaniel turned to Lily. There was no message from your mother, was there? The hint of a smile touched her lips. No, but you looked like you needed rescue. Later that evening, as Lily applied a poultice to his aching shoulders, Nathaniel confessed about Wilson's loan and Hollister's threat. The northern section has the only year-round water source, he explained. Without it, the rest of the ranch becomes worthless during drought years. And Mr. Hollister knows this, Lily concluded, her fingers working deep into the knotted muscles where his body stored its tension. He's wanted that land since before I bought it, Nathaniel admitted. Now he smells weakness and moves in for the kill, like a wolf circling an injured buffalo. Lily's hands paused. Even a wounded buffalo is dangerous when it chooses to stand its ground. For the first time since his illness began, Nathaniel considered fighting rather than simply enduring. The thought sent an unfamiliar warmth through his chest, not quite hope, but its stubborn cousin. Wilson was trying to protect me, he realized aloud. All these men depend on this ranch. On me. If I fail, then don't fail, Lily said simply, as if the solution were obvious. Heal enough to stand your ground. That night, a plan began forming in Nathaniel's mind, not just for survival, but for victory. He would need allies, strategy, and time. Most of all, he would need Lily's treatments to work enough that he could present a strong front to the town. We'll intensify your treatments, Lily promised when he shared his thoughts. And perhaps it's time you met some of my grandmother's people. They know this land better than Hollister ever will. As moonlight spilled across the floor of his study, Nathaniel realized something had shifted inside him. For the first time since his diagnosis, he was thinking beyond his illness, beyond mere survival. He was thinking like a man with a future. Whispers buzzed like angry bees around Nathaniel and Lily as they walked between colorful stalls at the Willow Creek Summer Fair. Children ran past with sticky candy faces, while musicians played fiddles under the August Sunday. For the first time in months, Nathaniel had left his ranch to join the community gathering, and everyone noticed. Look who's decided to show his face, muttered a shopkeeper to his wife, not bothering to lower his voice. Reid with that half-Indian girl treating his mysterious ailment. Lily kept her eyes forward. her simple blue dress standing out among the frilly fashions of the town ladies. Nathaniel felt a strange new feeling rising in his chest, not anger at being insulted, but anger that these people would look down on someone who had helped him when no one else could. "Ignore them," he said quietly, his hand steady as he passed a coin to the lemonade seller. Mrs. Perkins, the banker's wife, stood with 3 other ladies near the refreshment table. She raised her eyebrows so high they almost disappeared under her elaborate hat. "Mr. Reid, what a surprise to see you up and about. We'd heard you were at death's door," she said, fanning herself dramatically. "How fortunate you've found such unusual care." Her eyes cut to Lily with the sharpness of scissors snipping thread. Before Nathaniel could answer, a man's voice boomed across the fairground. "Friends and neighbors of Willow Creek, I have important news." The crowd turned toward the wooden platform where Edward Hollister stood, his silver mustache catching sunlight. Nathaniel felt his stomach tighten. Hollister never brought good news. "Our community faces uncertain times," Hollister announced. "Our largest employer, Nathaniel Reid, suffers from a brain sickness that makes him shake like a leaf. He can barely hold a pen, let alone run a ranch that puts food on your tables." People gasped and turned to stare at Nathaniel. "As his business partner, and out of concern for our town," Hollister continued, "I've asked the judge to let me take over his ranch until he recovers, if he ever does." Nathaniel pushed through the crowd, fighting the weakness that threatened his legs when he became upset. Lily followed close behind. "That's a lie, Hollister," Nathaniel called out, making heads turn. "I'm getting better every day." Hollister smiled, like a wolf spotting a wounded deer. "Is that so? Then surely you won't mind proving it." He held up some papers. "Come sign these water rights agreements right here, in front of everyone. A healthy man can write his name, can't he?" The crowd went silent. Everyone knew writing would reveal Nathaniel's trembling hands. Hollister had set the perfect trap. Nathaniel stepped forward anyway, determined to face shame rather than lose everything he'd built. His heart pounded in his chest. The pen Hollister offered looked impossibly small. Then he felt something unexpected. Lily's small hand slipped into his. "Remember what we practiced," she whispered, her brown eyes meeting his. "Breathe from your belly. Feel the ground under your feet. Your body remembers how to be strong." Nathaniel closed his eyes for just a moment, feeling the connection between his racing thoughts and shaking hands. He remembered Lily's lessons about how fear lives in the body. Slowly, he opened his eyes and reached for the pen. Moonlight painted silver stripes across Nathaniel's bedroom floor as the first snow of 1853 fell outside the window. The room smelled of pine and the herbs Lily crushed in a stone bowl while sitting beside his bed. The gentle grinding sound mixed with the crackling fireplace, creating a rhythm that calmed his mind. "The snow came early this year," Nathaniel said, watching her hands work with smooth, certain movements. "The old-timers say that means a hard winter ahead." Lily nodded, adding a pinch of something that smelled like mint to her mixture. The question that had bothered him for months finally found its way out. "Why did you help me that first night?" he asked. "I never treated you as anything more than Mrs. Willoughby's quiet daughter. I barely looked at you." Lily's hands paused. She looked up, meeting his gaze directly instead of keeping her eyes down as she once did. "You paid fair wages when other ranchers cheated their workers," she said simply. "You gave my mother a job when no one would hire a widow. You weren't kind, but you were fair," she resumed, grinding. "Besides, everyone deserves healing, even those who think they don't need anyone's help." "Nathaniel," he corrected softly. "After all this time, I think you should use my name." A small smile curved her lips. "Nathaniel," she repeated, and somehow the name sounded different in her voice, like it belonged to a better man than he had been. The court had rejected Hollister's attempt to take over the ranch. Nathaniel had signed those papers with a steady enough hand to keep his property safe. His tremors still came sometimes, but he had learned to manage them using Lily's breathing techniques and special tea. More importantly, He had stopped seeing his illness as a personal failure. My grandmother used to say that sickness often comes when we fight against our true path, Lily said, tying a leather cord around a small pouch of herbs. The body speaks when the mouth won't. Nathaniel watched snowflakes dance past the window. And what was I fighting against? Lily handed him the finished medicine pouch. That's something only you can answer. He thought about the empire he had built, the thousands of acres he owned, the men who feared him, the town that respected his money but never liked him. He thought about how he had measured his worth by what he owned, rather than who he was. I think I was fighting against needing anybody, he admitted. The words felt strange coming from his mouth, true words he had never spoken before. And now? Lily asked, her voice gentle but not pitying. Now I understand that standing alone isn't strength, Nathaniel said. Real strength is being brave enough to reach out your hand and accept help when you need it. Lily's eyes shone in the firelight. That's the hardest lesson for a proud person to learn. Outside, the snow continued falling, covering the harsh Wyoming landscape in a blanket of white. Inside, something new and fragile grew between two people from different worlds who had somehow found common ground. The ranch hands say you're a witch, Nathaniel said with a small smile. That you cast a spell on me. Lily laughed softly, the sound warming the room better than any fire. No spells. Just plants that grow from this same earth, breathing techniques any child can learn, and the body's own wisdom that modern doctors have forgotten. Whatever it is, Nathaniel said, his voice growing serious, you gave me back more than my health. You showed me a different way to live. He reached out, his once trembling hand now steady as he covered hers. Their fingers linked together, the weathered hand of the rancher and the gentle hand of the healer, forming a connection stronger than either had expected to find. Sunlight danced across the creek's surface as Nathaniel guided his chestnut mare along the familiar trail. His hands held the reins firmly, something impossible just months ago. A rider approached from the bend, and Nathaniel recognized the black medical bag before he saw the face. Mr. Reid! Dr. Brunswick pulled his horse to a stop, mouth hanging open. You're riding alone? Without assistance? The doctor's shock brought a smile to Nathaniel's weathered face. Seems the Grim Reaper will have to wait his turn. Brunswick dismounted, eyes narrowed with professional curiosity. He circled Nathaniel, studying him like a puzzle with missing pieces. The tremors, they've improved significantly. Your posture, your color. He shook his head. In my 20 years of practice, I've never seen such recovery from this condition. Life has a way of surprising us, Nathaniel replied, enjoying the fresh spring air filling his lungs. What treatment did you pursue? Surely not those experimental tonics from Chicago. Nathaniel thought of Lily's gentle hands, her patient instruction, the quiet strength that had pulled him back from darkness. I found someone who treated the man, not just the sickness. Understanding dawned in Brunswick's eyes. Miss Willoughby. The rumors reached as far as Cheyenne, though I dismissed them as gossip. He adjusted his spectacles. Her methods aren't recognized by medical science. They worked when yours didn't, Nathaniel stated, not unkindly. The doctor ran a hand through his gray-streaked hair. Perhaps medicine has something to learn here. Would she consider sharing her approach? For scientific documentation? Protectiveness flared in Nathaniel's chest. That choice belongs to her, not me. But understand this. Her healing involves more than herbs and hand positions. She showed me that getting better starts from within. Brunswick nodded slowly. The mind's influence on physical recovery remains largely unexplored territory. He glanced toward the ranch house visible on the distant hill. The territorial paper mentioned you've donated land for a school. Children shouldn't have to ride 20 miles for learning, Nathaniel replied. The schoolhouse, built on the eastern edge of his property, had been Lily's idea, a place where both settler and native children could study together. As they prepared to part ways, Brunswick cleared his throat. One more question, if I may. Town gossip suggests wedding bells at your ranch come summer. Might congratulations be in order? Nathaniel merely tipped his hat, urging his horse forward. Some joys were too precious for public discussion. Later, watching Lily tend her garden of medicinal plants, Nathaniel marveled at how completely his world had transformed. The ranch that once represented only his wealth now served a greater purpose. The hands that had clutched desperately to power now reached out to help others. "You're staring again," Lily said without looking up from her work. "Hard not to," he admitted, stepping into the garden. "You've brought more life to this place than all my cattle combined." She smiled, the expression lighting her face in ways that still took his breath away. "The newest batch of willow bark tincture is ready, for when the pain returns, and if it doesn't, then we'll use it for someone else who needs healing." She stood, brushing soil from her apron. "The Hendersons' youngest has a fever that won't break." Nathaniel nodded. "We'll ride over at first light." The word "we" still felt like a miracle on his tongue, a simple sound that had changed everything. Chalk dust floated in beams of afternoon light as Lily moved between rough wooden desks in the one-room schoolhouse. 20 children watched her with wide eyes as she held up plants from her medicine basket. "This purple flower fights fever and helps wounds heal," she explained. Her voice no longer whisper quiet, as it had been when she first entered Nathaniel's home 3 years ago. "My grandmother's people used it for hundreds of years before doctors had their pills." 8-year-old Tommy Jenkins raised his hand. "Is that what fixed Mr. Reid when the fancy doctor said he would die?" Before Lily could answer, the classroom door swung open. Nathaniel stepped inside, carrying a crate of new slate boards. The children straightened in their seats, still somewhat afraid of the tall rancher, despite his softer manner these days. "Miss Lily's medicine helped," Nathaniel said, setting down his burden. But her kindness did the real healing. His eyes met hers across the room, speaking volumes without words. A small girl, with dark braids, daughter of the Arapaho family, who'd settled nearby, whispered something to her neighbor. Lily smiled at the child's observation. "What did she say?" Nathaniel asked later, as they walked the creek path, where they'd exchanged wedding vows under a bower of wildflowers the previous summer. "That you look at me like her father looks at her mother," Lily replied, her hand warm in his. "Children notice everything." Nathaniel helped her across a fallen log, though his balance remained less steady than hers. "Dr. Brunswick published an article about your healing methods in a medical journal back east. He sent a copy last week." Lily's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Did he mention that half my knowledge comes from people his profession dismisses as savages?" "He did, actually. Called for a re-evaluation of indigenous wisdom." Nathaniel squeezed her hand. "Times are changing slowly." The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the Wyoming landscape gold. They crested the hill overlooking their home, no longer just Nathaniel's grand house, but a place where ranch hands' families gathered for Sunday meals, where traveling teachers stayed when passing through, where no one was turned away in need. "Edward Hollister is selling his property," Nathaniel mentioned. "Moving to California." "Are you thinking of buying it?" Lily asked, knowing how their rivals' land connected to the northern pastures. Nathaniel shook his head. "I was thinking we might help the Peterson family claim it. They've sharecropped long enough." Lily's smile widened. "The man I met 3 years ago would never have suggested such a thing." "That man was dying in more ways than one," he admitted. As they descended toward home, Nathaniel felt the familiar twinge in his right hand, not the violent tremor of before, but a gentle reminder of his mortality. He no longer fought against it but accepted it as part of himself. "Will we ride to the Hendersons tomorrow?" Lily asked, as lights began appearing in ranch house windows. "We will," Nathaniel confirmed, "though I suspect your presence will bring more comfort than any medicine." Evening settled over the ranch that had once been merely his possession, and now felt like a living, breathing community. Nathaniel Reid, once feared and now respected for reasons beyond his wealth, walked hand in hand with the woman who had shown him that true strength came not from standing alone, but from the courage to connect. The land would remain long after they were gone, but it would never again be simply owned. Like Nathaniel himself, it had been healed, transformed from a symbol of power into something that nourished both body and spirit. And in that transformation lay the miracle no doctor could have prescribed and no money could have purchased.